Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be taking a look at flying the Cowan Sims Robinson R66 helicopter. Let's get started. So when you think about Robinson, you really think about three different helicopters. So the first helicopter is the R22, which we've seen previously. Tons of fun. It's a very, very twitchy two-seater training helicopter. The R44, which is actually the best-selling general aviation plane since I think 1998 or 1999. And of course, we have this one, which is the R66, which is actually a relatively new helicopter for Robinson. And this is also their first turbine helicopter that they introduced. Now, there's a couple little weird things that make this different from the R22 or the R44, and we're going to be kind of concentrating on those elements of it because a lot of flying a helicopter comes from, honestly, muscle memory is the best way to describe it. So first things first, when we look around the cabin here, you'll notice a couple similarities. You'll notice we've got the little fuel cutoff with a little fun little guard there to kind of protect ourselves. You'll also notice that we have the same style yoke, or cyclic, I should say. I should use my technical terms here, as we have on our lovely Robinson 22 and 44 as well. You even see we have the little landing light switch just sort of chilling there in the middle. We have a lot more buttons on this, which I think is kind of cool because it allows you to do things like this. I love the fact that it has the autopilot button, but it also has a trim reset button. This is a trimmable helicopter, which is awesome. I'll show you how to set that up in a minute too, because it's something that's nice. This helicopter also has hydraulics, which is really, really cool. The hydraulics on the R66, of course, aren't so much to give you power steering as they are to reduce the effect of the rotor basically making our controls do one of these things in our hand. One of the reasons that it's so challenging to fly an R22 is because you don't have that stabilization. The extra little bit of oomph really, 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 really helps as far as that goes. Other things, of course, we're dealing with the turbine, so we have new gauges we have to worry about. Again, nothing too bad. I love the key click. And of course, we have nice modern electronics. No GPS or anything, but who needs GPS? It works perfectly fine without. So let's go ahead and let's get started here. One thing I appreciate is the fact they give us a handy dandy little checklist here. Very straightforward checklist. One of the things I thought was really amusing here is if you go to the back of it, actually there's nothing on it. I love that. But I'm not going to worry about it too much. All right, let's go through the motions. Seatbelts, check. Fuel valve, check. Cyclic friction, check. Collective, full travel free. Whee! And of course, we want to check this too. If you actually look at the outside here, if you look at the rotor, you can see the collective twisting the entire blade like a pro there. Love it. All right, cyclic's good. Rotors, rotor brake is disengaged. I said that a second ago. Circuit breakers are in. We don't have a lot of circuit breakers on this thing, but I'll go look just in case. Yeah, we're good. Circuit breakers are in. Cool. Let's see here. Cabin heat, anti-ice is off. Landing lights off. Avionics switches off. Altimeter set. Boop, all set. Hydraulic switches in the on position. You definitely want this. So the R66 POH describes flying without this. It's a little challenging to hover. You can do it, but it's just a little awkward. You know what I mean? All right, let's go ahead and run through the buttons now. Battery strobe switches are going to be in the on position. We're going to go ahead and hide our yoke here just to make this a little bit easier here. So we have our battery switches. We're going to pop that one on here. We're supposed to turn on strobe. Battery strobe switches on. Igniter key enable. So we go click, just like that. Area is going to be clear. We're just going to look around. Yeah, I don't think there's anybody who's going to bother too much today. I'm not going to worry about that. Say fuel cutoff is pushed off. Pull off. That's this guy right here. Notice we have two shutoff valves. We have this one, and we have this one. We need to make sure that one's the one that's out. Start button. So this is pretty easy. Actually, let's close our throttle there. Yeah, throttle's closed. So what we're going to do is we're basically going to go ahead and hit the starter button, which is possibly hard to find if you don't know where to look for it. And there it is right there. It's just chilling right there. We'll talk about the beeper in a different video there. And what we're going to do is we're going to press and hold until it engages. And then once we get to a good amount of RPM here, about 15%, we're just going to go ahead and push this in. It's basically about that complicated. I have a switch here to make it a little bit easier for me. Let's do it. See how there's a little arrow for you? That's it. So you're going to watch your MGT spike twice. And it's going to come down, and then the RPM is going to accelerate. And we're going to come up on idle in just a few moments. MGT is coming down. Measured gas temperature, by the way, in case you're curious. We don't have turbine inlet temperature. We have measured gas temperature this time, which is kind of fun. And you can see the N1, again, this is, we have a little centrifugal. It's a Rolls-Royce 250, I think, powers this. It's about 300 horsepower. Not too bad at all. There we go, about 65, and you can see we're settling about 300 Celsius. That's enough to boil tea, I think. And you'll notice our RPMs are very, 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 very low. Nothing to worry about yet, though. All right, start, good, good, good. Ignition, 25 oil pressure has come up. Yes, it has. We're going to make sure N1, yep, stable, fuel cutoff guard. Okay, it looks like we're stable. We're going to put the cutoff guard. I love this little thing that guards it so you don't accidentally. Let's see here, ground power disconnect, avionics headsets, all that comes on now. Go ahead and doop, boop, boop, just like that. We're going to get those all set. Annunciator panel test. Beep. That's what I would do. Let's see, our hydraulics, less than 12 gallons air filter. Every light came on. This one's spare. Don't worry about it. That looks good to me. Let's see, headsets are all set. I'm wearing mine. Let's see, annunciator, engine anti-ice. Engine anti-ice. I'm not going to worry about that too much. But if we need to check that, that's down there below on your left. Let's see here. Doors are closed. Cyclic is off. Hydraulic system is checked. Easy way to check that one is just to turn it off and see what happens. Give it a wiggle. Shut it off. Give it a wiggle. Nice. Okay, we're good. Sweet. All right. Lift collective slightly. We should get an angry sound. Yes, we do. All right, we're going to do an N1 deceleration check if we need to. We're not going to worry about it too much. And then, of course, it asks us to slowly open up the throttle. Now, the throttle here is actually a click throttle. It is not a throttle that you can actually hit. I mean, you can bind it if you want, but all we're going to do is click our left mouse, and we can just boop, 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 just like a little bit. And we're just going to watch everything slowly come up. The big thing here is you just don't want to over torque and you just don't want to over temp. There we go. See how it stabilizes? Gonna give it just a moment. And we're at full throttle. We're good to go. You can see the governor kicked in nicely. It is holding us currently at 100% RPM. You can see our N2, basically. Our N2 here, we're all set, so I'm not going to worry about that. Our tail rotors are going happily along as well. Engine's good. Output's good. Everything's, I don't know why it does this. You can tell we're dealing with the European developer here because they default to 7,000. A little different. All right, N1, N2, it says us to beep. We don't need to beep. We're at 100, so I'm not going to worry about that. And let's see, the lights are out. Engine gauges are in normal operating range. Come down here, you can see all of my gauges are in the normal operating range. Good to go. So we're pretty much ready to fly. We can go ahead and put this away, which is super. If we wanted to get a little technical here, we can come in here and turn on our GPS and get all that stuff all booted up. It's just one of those things that we do have the capability to do. Like I said, I like stuff like that. Oh, there's our engine anti-ice switch, like I was promising a little moments ago. Just looking down here, making sure that all looks good. Strobe lights are good. One really cool thing you have is this little panel option switch in this aircraft. So what you can do is you can actually change the panel mode. If you want to go to this like super duper modern digital display, you totally can. If you want a more kind of conventional, you can. The other thing you can do too is you can actually change what GTN you have. So if you have the 750, which is what I have, you can actually come in here and set that. Or if you want the more conventional version, you can come in here and set that too. Like I said, kind of depending on sort of what you like to do with your particular helicopter. Like I said, I'm used to this, but that's just me. All right, a moment ago, one of the things I was mentioning is I was mentioning the idea of trimming this helicopter out. Now, if you actually hit my escape key, well, you can, but I can, and you were to go over to my controls real quick, I'll go hit this one real fast. If I actually type in trim, T-R-I-M, type in trim, oh boy, there it goes. One of the things you will notice is you actually have rotor longitudinal and rotor lateral trim, and you can actually program these. Longitudinal, think of it as kind of up-down. Again, this would be nose down. This would be nose up if you want to think about it. Of course, you have your longitudinal and your lateral. Your lateral is going to give you left-right. Longitudinal is going to get you forward-backwards, kind of like elevator if you want to think about it. One thing I must warn you, though, is please have a rotor trim reset button. Let me show you why. So if I jump back in here real quickly, if I were to go ahead and start cranking on my trim here. One of the things, though, you'll notice is my RPM comes up because it's trying to balance it, even though it's not basically impossible to balance. So if I reset it, you'll notice the trim actually bops back down to where it needs to be. If you don't reset your rotor trim before you land, don't be surprised if your engine torque's sitting here at 40, even though you're parked. It's just kind of one of those quirky things that kind of come up. It's just, I don't know what they're trying to do there. So the warm-up period has basically expired. Everything's running smoothly. I don't have to beep the RPM or anything like that. I can tell that my oil pressure is fine. Oil temperature, it's a little warm, but it's not bad. Fuel, we've got everything we need for flight. It's time to get this thing going. So this one is a little easier to fly than the R22 because it's just got more inertia. You also have the hydraulic system, which makes your life a little bit more pleasant for you when you're trying to operate it. So what we're going to do is we're basically going to go ahead and get this thing light on the skids. The easiest way to do this in the real world, of course, is to look. Very hard to do this in this helicopter because if you notice, if I stick my head like this, you notice I'm not centered. I'm actually sitting on the left side of the seat here. You'd actually go like this and basically look to see when you start to get light on the skids. So what I'm doing is I'm gently pushing my left foot forward, and I'm doing, oh, there it is. And what we're doing is we're waiting for it to get light. In the real world, the whole helicopter goes like that, and it slowly lifts up just a little bit. Again, we're trying to find that sweet spot. When we find the sweet spot, see how we're starting to get a little bouncy there? That's the sweet spot right there. So if I look over here, I'm at about 40% engine torque. This is a good time to check to make sure your gauges are all in the green. You can see we're already at 80% of our N1 there, just to give you an idea of how much. So now we're light. So what we're going to do now is find the hover point. So what I'm going to do is take my stick, my cyclic here. You can see I've already got my left foot in there. Pull it towards me just a little bit. And when I say a little bit, I mean like a millimeter, and a little to the left. And all we're going to do is we're just going to lighten on the skids and try to feel what the helicopter wants to do. Do you see how it's kind of pulling to the left and it's kind of also rolling left? All we're going to do is compensate for that. I'm just going to continue. See how it gets really light on the skids? All we're going to do is find that center point. And when we find the center point, we're going to give just enough collective to roll itself off the ground and try really hard not to go ahead and scrape like I just did sloppily. Sigh, come on, man. You're supposed to be good at this thing. All right, let's go ahead and do some hover taxiing here. Go ahead and slip it to the left a little bit. Get ready to play the collective bounce game, I like to call it. There we go. Very nice. Okay, let's go ahead and make our way over to the runway here. Nice and easy. A nice, gentle hover taxi. Again, nothing too crazy. You're going to be doing a lot of work with your collective hand here. And again, depending on what you're set up at home. I use a conventional throttle, which makes this way more work than it needs to be. Let me just put it to you that way. It's much, much simpler with a collective. All right, we're just going to kind of migrate this way. Keep an eye on all my engine instrumentation. Looks pretty good. I'm going to lift the nose up. When I do that, I'm just going to apply just a little more collective so we don't go sinking there. I'm going to go ahead and tap it to the front. We're coming across the wind now. It is going to want to go to the left, so you got to compensate by hitting on the right. Whoa! A little bit too much on the collective there. Again, the difference between up and down on this is probably 0.5 millimeter, if you just want to think about it that way. All right, let's go ahead and glide forward. And I guess I have none of the assistance options here. This is old school flying here. There we go. Again, you can always slow down. Although in a helicopter, it's very difficult. It's very dangerous and difficult to go slow. There we are. So we're just going to kind of chill on the runway here. I think no one's coming. The windsock, we've got a crosswind right now, but that's okay for us. Go ahead and give it just a little. I think it's a 6 or 7 knot wind. It's not bad today or anything like that. All right, so we're just going to do a quick little slew onto the runway here. Enjoy the fact that I can do this. We're going to come into the headwind now. I like how those two windsocks are in opposite directions. That's pretty authentic, actually. There we are. We're just going to chill. Now, helicopter takeoffs are pretty straightforward. Our R66 POH basically says keep the nose down until you get to about 60, then let it come up, kind of a thing like that. So we're going to go ahead and use that as our method for takeoff here. So I'm just going to tip the nose forward. I'm going to push a little bit of collective in, and I'm just going to hold it. I'm actually stick my head up a little bit here. Careful not to scrape. All we're going to do is we're going to slowly work out the collective pedals. There's 40 knots. There's 50. There's 60, and we're going to let the nose come up, just like that. And you can see we're about 55 torque there, which is plenty of torque to get us up there. And we're going to climb at about between 60 and 70 knots is a pretty good speed. You can see over on my left there that I'm getting about 900 feet per minute, which is not bad. It is a bit of a sunny day, so it does not surprise me at all. You can go ahead and let off the anti-torque pedals just a little bit as well. We start to pick up speed there. So one of the things that makes this helicopter a little different than our friend the Robinson 22, yeah, this is the Robinson 66, is we have new things that limit our capabilities to go faster or to go slower. One's going to be our MGT, which again, measured gas temperature is 500. Our second item is going to be our engine torque. We can't exceed our limits on either one of those. Even though we have 300 horsepower, which is actually pretty awesome for a little helicopter like this, we have to be very, very mindful of those two limits. If I were just go ahead and crank up the collective here, you can see both of those are going to rise pretty evenly. Torque is obviously going to overwhelm before MGT overwhelms, unless you're at altitude, and then things get a little bit more interesting. Ah, good thing there's slow in this game, or this would have been pretty painful to get to this altitude. So what we have here is a little bit of altitude. We got about just around 7,400 feet here, and I get a beautiful look of the southern coast of Connecticut here as we're cruising around. And new things start to happen. One of the things you have to remember is just like in an airplane, our indicated airspeed is not our actual airspeed. Now you can see right now our indicated is about 90 knots. If I actually take my head down here and look, you can see we're doing 100 knots. Now you're sitting there going, oh, but wait, you're a helicopter. That's going to cause problems. Yes, it will cause problems. We have to actually be very cautious. It's so bad, as a matter of fact, there's a little handy dandy chart right here to remind you that there's certain speed limits that you can't violate based on the altitude that you are. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to nose over a little bit, bring my torque down to about 55. That's going to be plenty for us. Just let the nose come up just a little bit. And pause. I can let go of the controls for 10 seconds here. So if I come over here, one of the things you'll notice is we have our power on, do not exceed speed in knots indicated. And one of the things you'll observe, gotta go ahead and move my head in a little bit here. We're about 7,500 feet, and you can see clearly based on the outside air temperature, it's about right around 0. So let's see here, 112 knots is our VNE. Now, if you come down here and look at the airspeed, the thing you'll observe is 112 knots, conveniently, is our VNO. However, our VNO, or kind of our yellow speed, is now basically down here. And that's why I had this little tiny little notch there, just to remind us to be careful when we cross that particular threshold to not accidentally overspeed this helicopter. Oversped helicopters are very unhappy because you tend to get asymmetrical thrust, and asymmetrical thrust basically means you're going to get flipped. So you have to be careful with that. It'll basically roll you out of control. So we have plenty of altitude here. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about cruising with this helicopter. Cruising with this helicopter is very, very simple. And one of the things we have, as I showed you a moment ago, those control binds, is you can actually adjust the individual settings as far as trim goes. Now I'm going to go ahead and do longitudinal trim first. I'm going to give it a couple taps. And again, it's very dangerous to let the nose of the helicopter dive like that. But without having a super duper loose stick or force feedback, it is challenging. So right now I've gone ahead and set my longitudinal trim. I'll give it one more tap of longitudinal. Nice. So if you actually look, I'm not touching the stick right now. What a novelty in a helicopter. That never happens. But one of the things, of course, you'll observe is as we're ripping along here, we're doing about 100 knots indicated, which is plenty. That's about 111. So we're moving. It's the fact if I let go of the stick, we roll left. You can see that very, very clearly as it sort of slowly migrates to the left when I let go. And the reason it's going to be doing that is the asymmetrical loading of our lovely rotor blade above our head. It actually gets worse the faster you go. So one of the things a lot of people do is they'll give it a couple taps of that lateral trim. Now, if I let go completely, you will notice we are a trimmed out helicopter. Did you know you could have a trimmed out helicopter? Again, not perfect. I can see that I've got a little bit of a climb here. The easiest way to cancel this climb out, of course, everybody would say is just bring the collective down by about 1 millimeter. Yeah, if I do that, you know what else is going to happen? We're going to twist. So you got to kind of be mindful of that. So you can see here that we now have a nice and easy to fly helicopter. I have not touched the controls since I went ahead and got everything set up. So this is a good time to fiddle with some knobs, make some communications, make a radio call or two. But one of the things you'll observe there is we have no pedal trim, so we're always going to be twisting kind of awkwardly. And that's just kind of, like I said, part of the fun. And unfortunately, Flight Sim's default trim sensitivity is way too high, so it makes it very challenging. In the real world, it's actually pretty cool what you do with the helicopter controls. You pull them to where you want, and you push the trim button, and it holds them there. So we don't have that capability, sadly. All right, let's talk about descent. So we've got everything nice to go. Now we can cruise like this all day. Like I said, anywhere between 100, 110 knots, you're moving pretty good with this helicopter. We are not exactly a jet or anything along those lines. Endurance, by the way, you can get anywhere between 2 and 3 hours if you're trying to estimate. So about 250 to 300 nautical miles is going to be your range here. That's a lot of work. You'll know what I mean about the first 45 minutes into the flight there. So let's go ahead and descend. Now, descending in a helicopter is not about pushing forward on the stick. As a matter of fact, it gives you a very angry warning not to do that. If we do that, we crash. We're going to get mast bumping, and the entire assembly is going to flip right off the top. We need that. Otherwise, we're a very weird looking car. Easiest way to descend in a helicopter is just go reach over to our collective control. Let's go get this thing all back leveled off again. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to gently pull back until we get about 400 feet per minute. Now, let's see here. That gets me, if my nose level there is about right there, it's about 400 feet per minute right there. Now, different types of helicopters are going to have different limitations as far as how fast you can descend, depending on what manufacturer, depending on what rotor technique they use. But usually between 400 and 500 feet per minute is pretty good. I've seen some as much as 1,000 feet per minute. But one of the things you got to remember is when we unload that rotor, we're going to have a tendency to increase the RPM. Now, right now, our RPM is basically perfect. We're chilling right at 100% there. So we don't have to worry about it too too much. Now, some people are like, well, I'm in a hurry. I need to descend fast. Can I just let the nose drop on a helicopter? Not. We're basically at our absolute limits right now. We really, really, really don't want to go any faster down, and we really, really don't want to go any faster forward. Otherwise, we're going to be doing a lot of damage and causing all sorts of nasty problems. Remember, helicopters are like tools. I mean, so airplanes are tools too. You can see we're getting into a very ferocious descent here, and you can see how our airspeed picked up. Look at that. I just pull it back for just a second. You see how fast that happens? That is the nature of helicopters, and that's, again, why I love them so much. So one of the things you have to kind of keep in mind is this thing is a precision tool. It is not like an airplane where it's like, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. It really is a, how do I want to get there? One of the things they're always talking about from safety guides and stuff like that is that as a helicopter pilot, getting all that fixed wing mentality out takes a really, really long time, and it's a very, 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 very dangerous. So what we'll do now is we'll go ahead and fast forward to the moment when we're just about to set down to the ground. There we go, looking pretty good so far. So what we've done, of course, is descend. It takes a minute. If you manage to get a helicopter up that high, you're doing okay. So landing this helicopter is a little different. Many people think about the traffic pattern for an airplane. They go, well, how is it different than a helicopter? There's actually a lot of differences. For one, we take right turns. The second thing we do is we tend to stay about 500 feet AGL versus 1,000 feet AGL. Remember, we can stop in midair, more or less, depending on, of course, our weight and temperatures and stuff like that. So when we're entering into a traffic pattern here, I put myself at the most awkward angle possible. We're always landing into the wind, just like an airplane does. One of the things we always want to be mindful of is our airspeed in the traffic pattern. Now, remember earlier when we were taking off that we maintained about 60 knots? 60 knots is our minimum speed, even though we have that lovely, lovely capability there to basically fire up and put that nose over and go up to 110 if we needed, or we can come down almost to a complete hover. We need to make sure we keep our speed up. One of the things that's the most dangerous condition we can do is stalling the rotor on the helicopter. If we stall the rotor, it creates more drag, which slows the RPM down, which makes the stall worse. So it's like this infinite loop of you're going to crash and die, and thank you for playing helicopter. It's just a really, really dangerous combination. So we always have to be very mindful of that. One of the safest ways to be able to recover from that is just making sure our speed is kept up sufficiently so we don't accidentally get into a position where that could happen. Now, there's always a chance. Like I said, you always got to be very mindful. These things are slightly different. So what I'm doing basically right now is taking an extended downwind, and we're going to come spinning around and align ourselves up with a nice little westerly landing there. So everything's looking pretty good. I've got myself right around 60 knots. It's about 60, 65 is pretty good here. I'm going to go ahead and execute my turn, and we're just going to set up for a little landing here. And again, when you're doing this, always avoid pushing the nose down. That's one of the things I still have to learn. And just take your time. Like if the helicopter starts kind of getting away from you, just back up just a little bit. You go about 65 or a little fast. That looks pretty good to me. There we are. And you can see, even at 60 knots, you can see how fast and how easy this helicopter just wants to rip away on you. So we're going to start my descent now. And again, we're just going to come around just a little bit here. It looks good to me. Whoop, getting a little slow. I'm just, again, don't let the nose drop. There we go. We're going to get just a little slow here, but that's okay. We also want a higher descent rate. We didn't give ourselves nearly enough room. The nose come down just a millimeter. I'm not pushing forward. I'm just letting it drop a little bit. Looks good to me. Looks good to me. There we go. It's a much more comfortable speed right there. There we are. Well, I'm going to start transitioning. Nice thing is that when we get rotor and ground effect, this thing gets very easy to handle. And there we have it. Nice. Very cool. So while landing this thing, relatively straightforward. The first thing you want to do is press the trim reset button. Usually I do that on final. I wouldn't do that there. Otherwise, that exact thing is going to happen to you like you just saw there. And when you reset the trim, of course, it's going to prevent the weird little shenanigans you're going to get on the ground. So once we go ahead and decide on when we want to land, like I said, we want to go ahead and pick the direction we want to land. In this case, wind is going to be facing directly at us, which is a good spot. Makes it a little bit easier. And all we're going to do is basically settle onto the ground. Nice and easy from a hover. Remember, that little ground effect a little bit is going to surprise you when you go to land. And there we are, nice and down on the ground. Fantastic. Shutdown of this helicopter is very, very simple. Obviously, we want to give it a few moments to kind of cool off. We've been a little rough with it today. You should have seen the descent that you didn't get to see. So again, we always want to be kind of mindful of that aspect too, even though we are a turbine. So what we're going to do is to get this thing all kind of backed out and off. We're just going to kind of do the reverse of what we did to get this thing started. Go ahead and pop off those first. Give it a few moments there. And we're going to gently roll the throttle backwards. Now, the big thing with the throttle is as this starts to come down, you're going to hear the RPM start to come down, and you're also going to see a couple other things happen as well. So we pull that down, you're going to notice we get the low RPM. Does not surprise us. You can also hear all sorts of nasty noises kind of above our heads. Our RPM starts to drop. Everything's looking pretty good. We're under 90%. You're also going to notice that the N1 is going to drop down to kind of like this little idle position here. And you can see it's basically chilling. When you're ready to actually shut it down, we're going to pull the fuel guard off. We're going to go ahead and pop that off like this. It's going to get all grumpy at you and say, hey, you did X, Y, Z. And it's going to slowly slow down. Once we get down to a nice level, we can actually go ahead and pop a couple things off here. We can even pop the battery off if we want. It'll slow down on its own. And of course, if you look behind you, you've got this lovely little thing that says brake. So we just go ahead and give that a tug. You're going to pull it down and back. And what that's going to do is get the rotor to slow down to a complete stop. When you're ready to get out, it's just a matter of opening the hatch, climbing on out, and enjoying.